Okay, our first writer, her name is Deb Broad. She goes by DC Broad, and she's the author of the Getting Even Caper series, Getting Sassy, Getting Lucky, and the just released Getting Taken. If you've read Getting Taken or are planning to, she would really appreciate it if you would give her a short review on Amazon. Doesn't have to be a nice one like in the Atlantic or the New Yorker or something. Just a few sentences, give her 3, 4, 5, 6 stars, whatever you feel like. It's really, really tough for self-published authors, and it's kind of tough for traditionally published authors in some cases to get reviews. It really helps a lot. So let's try to help each other. So if you read the book, or planning to read the book, try to give her a review. What else? Oh, and the cover is by a local artist named Tom Lichtenfeld. Did I pronounce that right? Lichtenheld, excuse me. Beautiful cover. And if you go up there and take a look at the book on the break, you'll note the interior design is gorgeous too. It's a work of art. Townhouse Bookstore is hosting an author dinner for Deb Thursday, March 23rd. Tickets are available starting tomorrow. She's going to do a reading. You get really cool food. Tickets are $40, which includes your meal, tax, and gratuity. There will be a bar. There is a cash bar. You can call Townhouse for tickets or stop by and buy them while you're there perusing books. She is also the author of the Quint Macaulay detective series and Heartstone, a contemporary Arthurian thriller. She is an award-winning short story writer with a collection of 3 previously published short stories featuring the Chicago Cubs available as an ebook, and that's called A Chicago Cubs Triple Play. She lives in St. Charles, Illinois, and she is going to come on up here.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I'm reading from Getting Taken, and this is sort of not exactly in the middle, but I need to explain what's going on. This actually sort of introduces a subplot which gets tangled up with the main plot, which involves a painting that has been missing since World War II. And it features, the books feature Robin and her mother. Robin's in her 40s, and her mother's in assisted living and in her 80s. And her mother just lost a friend, so she's staying with Robin just overnight because Robin really doesn't want her to stay any longer. And Robin and her boyfriend in the first 2 books, Mick, have broken up because Robin doesn't want kids and he's not sure. So he's dating a woman with a little kid, just to see how that goes. Anyway, she finds, she's unpacking in her office and she finds a loose floorboard and she pulls it up and she finds a pound of marijuana in a bag. So instead of calling the police, she calls Mick. True to his word, Mick arrived in less than 15 minutes. I waited for him in the living room looking out the big bay window. My mother was still sleeping, and I didn't want the crazy doorbell waking her up. He was driving his Audi rather than the Porsche. Cars are Mick's one big extravagance. And when I let him in, I asked about it. He shook his head as he sighed. Never take a 4-year-old to a ball game and buy him whatever he wants to eat. Never. That couldn't have ended well. It didn't. He looked like he needed a hug, so I wrapped my arms around him. After a hesitation, he returned it. I'd missed his hugs. They were warm and solid without being overpowering, and he always gave my shoulder a quick caress before releasing me. Today was no different. Good to see you, he said, fixing me with his gaze. When I'd first met Mick, I thought his eyes were ciphers, the product of years spent keeping people out of his head. As I'd gotten to know him, I'd come to read his mood by his eyes. But today I wasn't sure. And when he broke off to reach down and pet Bix, who adored him, I had no idea what was going through his head. I watched him scratching the sweet spot behind Bix's right ear and remembered how my physical attraction to him had surprised me a little. Mick had spent 10 years as a jockey until an injury forced him to retire. He was several inches shorter than me, but at some point I'd stopped noticing. He gave Bix a final pat on the butt and looked up at me. That was when I realized he was expecting a response. Oh, good to see you too. I felt the color rise from my chest. I added, although you might think differently when you see this. Yeah? He followed me into my office, and I shut the door behind us. My mom's taking a nap. Don't want her wandering in, as though I needed an explanation for closing the door. I walked him over to the closet and pointed at the hole made by the slat I'd removed. You'll never guess what I found in here. An alternate universe? I gave him your weird look, opened one of the boxes and pulled out the bag of weed. Holy, that my thoughts, exactly. He took the bag, opened it, and the pungent smell rose in a wave. Mick breathed in deeply. Whoa, he said, reaching in to pinch off a little, which he smelled and rubbed between his thumb and forefinger. Then he dropped it back into the bag and sealed it. I don't suppose this is medical marijuana. He wiped his hand on his jeans. I don't see a prescription label. Well, are you calling the cops? I considered before answering him. I don't think I want to, but it's more complicated than that. Why am I not surprised? He looked around for a place to sit, saw only the reading chair in the corner and the desk chair piled with books. He opted for the floor, sitting with his back to the wall, legs stretched out in front of him and his ankles crossed. I lowered myself so I was sharing the space beside him on the wall. I'm listening. At first I thought this belonged to Maggie, but that doesn't make sense. I agree. Who's Maggie? The woman who owned the house before I did. I mean, even if you were in a hurry, would you forget to take this with you? I can't argue with that. And so? It must belong to someone she knew, but it's in her house. I don't want to get her in trouble. He pondered that and then nodded. Why the loyalty? I'm not sure. I love this house, her kitchen, love the fact that she painted it lime green, and the doorbell chime is Hall of the Mountain King. Really? To which part? The last. Yeah, then I added, when my mother gets up, I'll play it for you. He leaned his head back against the wall. So you're doing this for someone you've never met, or maybe for the friend of someone you've never met. I looked down at the bag of glittering green buds. Someone didn't just forget about this. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. How much do you think it's worth? He took the bag from me and hefted it. Better than £1, depends on the quality. This looks good, smells good. I don't know, maybe $3,500, maybe even $4, street value. He returned the bag to my lap. My neighbor was here this morning and she was dishing on Maggie. Among other things, she said Maggie had a boyfriend she used to fight with, lots of yelling. She said Maggie moved suddenly. Then here one day, gone the next, literally. Maybe he left this here. Oh, that's even better. Now we're throwing in a pothead boyfriend into the mix. Potheads are usually very mellow people. Sure, that'd explain all the yelling. Before I had to respond, and really I had nothing, he asked, what are you going to do when he comes to collect it? Give it to him. It's not like he's going to walk in. I've had the locks changed. I considered the possibility that whoever owned the stash was not going to be calm and reasonable. I simply chose to believe that his or her desire to retrieve it would mesh with my desire to be rid of it. I see, he's going to ring your crazy doorbell, and you're going to open the door. He'll say, I believe you've got a pound of weed that belongs to me. You'll say, 1 moment, please. He'll wait patiently on your porch while you fetch the bag. You hand it to him, and he says, thank you. Done and dusted. Don't be silly, I'll put it in a bag first. Sounds like you've got this all worked out, he said with more than a trace of sarcasm. What do you need me for? You need me to tell me if I'm being stupid. Am I? Have you not been listening? He grinned when he said it, but he made his point. Then he shifted so he could face me. What if the guy who shows up is an undercover narc? Okay, I don't have it all worked out. That's what I'll do. Here's what I'll do first. I'll call Carol, my realtor, see if I can talk to Maggie, say that she left something behind, maybe jewelry or photos. Once I talk to Maggie, I'll know what to do. What if no one claims it? He paused. Will you destroy it? No. I pulled it to my chest. As I pulled it to my chest, I realized my maternal instincts were wildly inappropriate. You're starting to scare me a little. I'll keep it. I let the bag drop to my lap. I don't think it should be illegal. It's a plant. It's not something I'm cooking up in a lab. I could grow it in my backyard. I paused, looking down at my newfound cause. So maybe I'm making a statement. Is that the bottom line? You want the pot? No, not the bottom line. It's just near the bottom. I really do feel strongly about legalization. Well, aren't you the little suburban insurgent? How come I've never seen you smoke? I don't do it much anymore. It bothers my asthma, but there was a time I enjoyed a not-so-occasional joint. I looked over at him and shrugged. I traded pot for scotch. Point taken. Then he asked, And then he added, but did you know that there's now a cannabis inhaler for people with asthma? Well, that's interesting. I mentally filed it away, but that's not why I called this meeting. I know. He leaned back against the wall and was silent for a minute. I waited, figuring he was working this one out in his head. Finally, he said, do me a favor, if I can. He looked at me. If someone comes to claim this, call me. Make sure I'm here. Okay. Promise? I promise. Our eyes met, and I swore I got a little weak. He leaned toward me. Robin, where are you, Robin? With a sigh, I started to push myself up from the floor. When I heard her footsteps right outside my office door, I jumped up, thrust the bag into an open box, and slammed the lid down. In here, Mom. I opened the door for her. She had my Afghan wrapped around her thin shoulders, and her glasses were askew. She looked down at me. She looked at me, down at Mick, then back to me. What are you two doing in here with the door shut? Hello, Mrs. Guthrie, Mick said, and I could tell by the way the edge of his mouth was twitching that he was trying not to crack up. I had a different reaction. This is my house, Mom. I can do anything I want in here. Oh, she paused and sniffed the air. What is that smell? Nothing. I just got rid of a couple dead plants the previous owner left here. Mick turned away. I hurried on. We're going over some financial stuff. We'll just be a minute or two. That's all right. I'll make myself something to eat. Mom, why don't you sit in the living room for a few minutes? Maybe watch some TV? Oh, all right. She shuffled away. I waited until I heard the TV switch on. Then I turned to Mick. Where were we? Our eyes met again. Of course, I knew exactly where we'd been, but the moment had passed. He got up from the floor slowly, testing his bad leg before putting weight on it. Thanks for coming by. Wouldn't have missed this for the world. Before he left my office, I told him about Lionel. Mick had met him a few times and they'd hit it off, but then everyone liked Lionel. How's your mom doing? She doesn't want to talk about it yet. And this surprises you? I know, we both tend to internalize things. We walked through the living room where my mother was watching some talk show featuring rude people. She hit the mute button. Are you two through with your secret meeting? We are, Mom. Nice to see you, Mrs. Guthrie, Mick said, then added, I'm sorry to hear about Lionel. Thank you, Mick. She nodded as though accepting a compliment, then turned back to the silent TV. On his way out, Mick rang the doorbell and listened to the tune. I'd give you a week before you change it.